Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Time for the Hurricane Outlook and discussion. It is Monday, the 15th of August, 2022. And as the title card says, it is almost time out there, getting towards peak time of the Atlantic hurricane season. So we have a lot to look at as we prepare for that. And other topics that I'll cover, including a look back at the origins of infamous Hurricane Andrew, coming up now on 30 years since that fateful day that it struck South Florida as a Category 5, and we'll look at how 98L, the remnants of it anyway, could impact the already fairly robust monsoon for 2022. All right, let's get rid of me, go to the satellite animation here. I love this shot, the true color version of it from Levi's site, Dr. Cowan at Tropical Tidbits. And what stands out for you? Hopefully this does right here. Look at that. That's what's left of 98L. I mean, it looks like a hurricane made landfall down here and has been weakening ever since. But it wasn't. It wasn't even a depression. Now, there's some debate that maybe the National Hurricane Center will go back and look at it and post-analysis. Doesn't matter for right now. It does matter at how well organized it is. Look at that outflow. Still very well established with it. A very concentrated area of low pressure. Lots of moisture moving across Texas. Yes, I know the Dallas area. Houston could use some up in the Panhandle. You know, Texas is a big state. It can't rain everywhere. So at least our friends down here in South Central Texas and South Texas and Eastern Texas there, Corpus and that area, boy, you had like a half a foot of rain, if not more. You know, take what you can get. Be glad for your friends down to the south. And by the way, yes, this will track on towards New Mexico and eventually add to the monsoonal moisture. And we'll look at that in more detail in just a few minutes. There's TD number 10E, a non-event. Don't worry about that. We do have to watch this energy right here, as it may end up crossing Central America, and then once it pops out into the Bay of Campeche over here, depending on how much water it is able to traverse as opposed to land, it might be our next feature to really keep an eye on in the Atlantic Basin. We'll see about that. A little sneaky system right there. This is the leftovers of 97L. Looked like it was trying to flare up yesterday, but that has since been had the kibosh put on it by upper level winds. So other than that, things are nice and quiet across the Atlantic Basin for today. Here's the radar animation out of Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas. Nice to see good heavy rainfall there, steady rains, even maybe on the southwestern suburbs of San Antonio, a little bit of rain shower activity. But look at that, very vigorous low-level circulation there in Mexico. There's the Rio Grande River. Not too much of a heavy rain event. You know, this is one of those situations where the tropical system proves to be beneficial rather than more harm, as it is moving fairly quickly, not dumping 30, 40 inches of rain like we've seen some past infamous Texas tropical systems do. And that moisture, again, will continue on towards the desert southwest with time. Now, this is interesting. I mentioned this in my What's Up segment this morning, that when you see the Pacific starting to calm down, especially as we have seen how busy it has been July and through August, and this is it, TD10E weakening, it'll dissipate, and there will be no new areas anytime soon developing in the Eastern Pacific. So either one of two things is going to happen. Either the entire globe, the West Pacific's also very quiet. The Atlantic Basin's generally quiet right now, as you know. So either everything is just going to become dormant at the height of Atlantic hurricane season or the Northern Hemisphere cyclone season, whichever way you want to look at it, or the Atlantic Basin will take over as we get towards the end of August and become fairly busy through August, the remaining part of August, that is, all of September and a good chunk of October. That makes the most sense considering all of the other factors that we have that I will lay out before you here in the rest of today's update. All right, there you go. So one of those factors, this is pretty easy to understand. We've got the La Nina over here in the Pacific strengthening. Look at those anomalies right there. Very, very cold, 3 degrees Celsius or more. So that's a big plus for Atlantic hurricane activity. There's no El Nino. The main development region through here is warmer than average. Definitely, there are no cold anomalies in here at all. Now, the subtropics up here, this is getting eroded away just a little bit. I'm going to get my back end folks to produce an animation over the last 30 or 60 days or so. We'll look at that on Wednesday, and we're going to see how this has just a little bit been shrinking, and that's a really, really big deal, because the less cold anomalies that we have up here and the more these warm anomalies expand, and every day counts now, the more it bolsters the idea that we're going to have an eventual uptick in activity. But this has been gradually eroding away ever so slightly out here. But I'm telling you, this right here, this main development region being warmer than average, it's not substantial, it's not record-setting, but it is certainly there. That is also, we can just put a big plus mark, that's favorable for Atlantic development. Very, very warm in the subtropics, way up in the North Atlantic. Out of the subtropics, the far North Atlantic, ridiculously warmer than average. Gulf of Mexico is moderated a little bit. It's either right at where it should be, that's that tan color, or just slightly warmer. But, as I'll show you in a moment, make no mistake, it is still quite warm. In fact, let's just see it now, shall we? We shall. 30 Celsius all around Florida. I mean, when 30 Celsius is just a little bit above normal, I mean, that's 85 Fahrenheit, if memory serves. Wow. 30 Celsius in and around parts of Louisiana and Texas. There's a few areas where it's cooled off a little bit. But even these greens in here, if you look at the legend, between 28 and some change and 29, so almost 82, 83 Fahrenheit. Plenty warm, lots of upper ocean heat content through here. So even though the Gulf is not exceedingly warmer than average, believe me, it is warm enough. And all you need is really 80, 81 degrees Fahrenheit, around 26, 27 Celsius. And as long as it's not just at the surface and you have some deep warm water, yes, with atmospheric conditions allowing. And look what happened there as 98L came down here and made landfall. It tried, and it was going over, marginally, I won't say hot water, 28, 29 Celsius. That wasn't ridiculously warm, and it was well on its way because the atmosphere is what was cooperating quite a bit in that region. All right, off of the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic area, we had a front that came through, big old trough, so the shelf waters here have been disturbed, cooled off just a little bit, but not far offshore at all. Look at that, 29 Celsius out here in the Gulf Stream and vicinity. Plenty warm, plenty of upper ocean heat content. That water is deep, it's moving, constantly being refreshed with more warm water. So if anything comes along, there is plenty of heat for it to tap into. Now, the question is, of course, we're all wondering, will something come along? This is a great tool. I show it a lot, the vorticity signature. And in the Eastern Pacific, at least we have an example here. That is what I look for right there, that rounded appearance of the bundling of that energy. When it's stretched out, it kind of looks like an amorphous blob, or it's clearly linear, covering thousands of miles, like, let's see what we got here that I can show you. Like right through here in the nation's midsection, just a huge area of energy spread out over a couple thousand miles at least there. The vorticity down here with X98L, that's starting to stretch out. That's not what we're looking for. This is. Do we see anything like that in the tropics? Yeah, a little bit right there. But there's not much to it. It is not very robust right now. There's not a lot of deep thunderstorms to continue to crank that vorticity up, get that spin to really spin faster and concentrate it more. It's just not there. Some energy out here in the deep tropics, but is generally, as you can see, spread out. So nothing on the map here that really jumps out as being problematic of developing over the next several days, but it is an interesting feature to look at for sure. We'll use it a lot more. And I will draw your attention to right down here. Yes, some of this energy might try to pinwheel its up into this direction over the next few days, and we'll look at that in the modeling here in just a moment. So let's visit this tweet here real quick from Andy Hazelton. Last night, the 0Z GFS, I'm sure all of you saw it, really lighting things up. The ensemble's starting to hint of development. Africa, where the upward motion is very prevalent right now, that generates these tropical waves. We can see that here on some of these graphics as I expand them. Lots of energy over Africa. That energy will eventually spill out into the Atlantic, and it'll just be a matter of, does that energy do something? And we look to the ensembles as a guide. It is not exactly what's going to happen. This is guidance. This is, a forecast from a whole bunch of models giving you lots of different outcomes. And for a change, it is not blank now. We're starting to see more of these ensemble members. This is from the GEFS. That is the Ensemble Forecast System. GEFS, Ensemble Forecast System of the GFS. A few more of the members starting to pick up on the possibility of development out in the deep tropics there. Let's get rid of me and the telestration. I think I was able to do that. And the Euro, the EPS, the Ensemble Prediction System, also indicating more in the way of development as we progress through about the 10-day time frame. Not anything anytime soon, but about the 10-day time frame. And you notice a little bit of a hint over here in the Western Caribbean into parts of the Bay of Campeche. Back to the GEFS real quick. That is also showing it. And that's that little sneaky area of vorticity that I was showing you. All right, so let me explain these next couple of diagrams. The MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, a larger area of favorability in the atmosphere, allowing the air to rise, especially at the 200 millibar level, up where the commercial jetliners fly. You cannot have upper level winds cutting across the deep tropics at an angle of any velocity more than about 10 to 15 knots. Anything stronger than that, you start to shear off a tropical wave coming the other way. You know what that looks like. I think we're all smart enough. And the MJO is a broad area. It's hard to visualize where the favorability exists for a good period of time. So it's not a short jolt of energy and favorability, what we call a convectively coupled Kelvin wave. It's a larger waveform in the atmosphere. You have these areas of sinking air and areas of rising air. And you can visualize that in a lot of different ways, and this is one of those ways, the phase diagram chart. And the simplest way to look at it here for our purposes is when the MJO moves into phases 2 and 3, we typically see activity favored in the Atlantic Basin. When the MJO is over here, out of phases 2 and 3, it's not usually favorable in the Atlantic Basin. That's not to say you can't get development, because you can have little pockets where something might pop up. But when the Madden-Julian Oscillation moves into phases 2 and 3 especially, you have a broader area really favoring Africa and the Eastern Atlantic, and things become more favorable. How? How do they become favorable? Well, again, those upper level winds, 200 millibars, the moisture is more prevalent. It's just a nice period of time for something to get incubated coming off Africa. And that seeds the Atlantic with these strong systems. And then they go along and they battle upper level lows, areas of wind shear. They move out of those areas. They find a favorable pocket that is smaller, what we call a ULAC, or an upper level anticyclone, not the same as the Madden-Julian Oscillation. And they either strengthen right towards landfall, think of Harvey, think of Michael, or they get sheared and they die off like some other hurricanes that I can't think of off the top of my head. But you get the idea. The MJO, we'll write it over here, the MJO, this is big, this is very important here, and this is the ECMWF. What does it show? Well, this is where we are right now. Right now we're in the circle, the null area. Not much MJO activity discernible anywhere. It's null and void, so to speak. The red is the next 7 days, if I remember correctly, something like that. So you just follow. They've made it harder to follow, unfortunately, but that's why I'm here. So you follow this through. There's the 23rd, 25th, 27th that goes back into the circle. These are all the ensemble members, these little angel hair pasta deals. So the bottom line, if I just kind of draw all this in yellow, the ensemble envelope generally favors what? Phases 2 and 3. Coming out of 1 into 2 and 3. That is the Western Hemisphere and Africa towards the Indian Ocean, providing upward motion and the ability of these tropical waves to become really, really robust. The JMA, Japanese Meteorological Agency, also indicating out of the null phase and across phase 1 into phase 2. And this is pretty darn amplified right there. If the JMA is to be believed, this is a pretty good amplification towards the 25th. It's a little bit slower, and this would indicate that we really start to crank things up towards the end of the month, and a slower progression. You could just extrapolate this out, that we could really see some big-time activity as we end August and get into the first part of September. This is another way to visualize it. This is a Mercator Projection Map. This is all the green area that I was talking about. That's that upward motion. This is sinking motion in the Pacific. When is this? This is starting the 20th. Hey, that date rings a bell, literally, ending through the 25th, so a fairly short period of time. Look at the gradient here, the most focused upward motion across Africa and the western parts of the Indian Ocean. That should jumpstart the hurricane season to become quite active even after this moves on through. These waves will be sent into the Atlantic where they do their thing. They encounter pockets of unfavorable followed by pockets of favorable, and that's when we start tracking them. So this is the evidence that I present to you. Either this is wrong and this doesn't happen, which is hard to believe that this would just fail, or this does set up, everything rolls off and we start to really crank out the hurricanes, or the third option, this happens as forecast, all this upward motion, everything's in place, and for some reason that becomes a mystery of mankind, no hurricanes develop. That's the part that we just don't know. Nobody knows that for sure. But man, the overwhelming evidence, and I'm presenting it here for you. I don't make this stuff up. These are not my models. You know, my bias is, yes, I do this as a business, and when there's no hurricanes, very few people are interested in what I do. I get it. That's fine. But, you know, other than that, if this happens, we will all be ready for it. And if it doesn't, we will certainly be scratching our collective heads. What's going on with the Earth right now that we can't produce tropical cyclones? Logic would dictate that that's not going to be the case, that this setup is going to be enough to really kick things off in the coming days through September and into October. All right? So what does that look like on the operational models? Well, this is the GFS, the 12Z run from today. A couple things to note. Watch this area right down through here. That's that little area of vorticity that I showed you already. And then, of course, out in the deep tropics. And again, as I said, I'm going to run this all the way out to 384 hours. So you can play along at home here. This is 24, 48, and then finally 72, and then 96. Just an ever so slight reflection right down there in the Bay of Campeche. If I zoomed into the western portion of the basin, it would show up better. I mean, you know, even if it just traverses a little area, yes, it could still go if conditions are favorable. And yes, people live in Mexico. It matters. It's not just the U.S. that we're interested in here. At least not me. Look, people watch these YouTube videos all over the world, even in Antarctica. So just saying. Moving on out past hour 96, there's 120, and the Atlantic stays pretty quiet. We are now at that magic August 20th, when the overall activity should start to ramp up. So what happens after that? Well, let's go out to 6 days and then finally 7. And look, as if right on cue, the tropical waves come off of Africa, a little bit lower latitude there, and there's some good vorticity associated with that. Again, this is way out in time, about a week out, but this is reacting to this and this and this. The operational starting to pick it up. Out into the Atlantic, that energy goes. That one doesn't really do much, but the next one comes out. It tries to. We're way out beyond 10 days. We're well within all of that upward motion that I was telling you about. And look, another little sneaky area trying to come in over here in the Bay of Campeche. We're not even done with August yet. There could be possibly 2 or 3 named storms, or there could be nothing. I know that. It just makes sense, doesn't it? Like, you follow the evidence. The operationals are picking up on it. Look at these energy pieces coming out. Now, don't look at this and say, all right, you know, that's so far out in time, you can't take it at face value. I know that, and you know that. This is reacting to what I just showed you. If this was blank after I just showed you all of that guidance, that would be really weird. That the operationals are picking up on those other signals that I showed you lines up and makes sense that stuff's going to change towards the end of the month. That's not the same as it is definitely going to happen. We still have to get there and see if the reality is what we're seeing here. But, I mean, come on. Layer after layer of evidence seems to suggest that as we get towards the end of the month, the tropics get a lot more active, as you can see there, assuming that they are reacting to what I just showed you with the progression of the Madden-Julian oscillation. That's what we call the intraseasonal forcing, on top of the climatological favored period. Everything's lining up. So if this doesn't do it, the weather's broken. And we got to go back to the drawing board. Something is very goofy. All right, now if we switch over to the Ecmwf, the Euro, interesting, you can see the vorticity signature of 98L even on this resolution. Of course, the Atlantic Basin nice and quiet as we start things out. But where does this evolve over the next 10 days? This only goes out to 10 days. Put this into motion for you. Notice a couple of things real quick. At about hour 72 to 96 or so, a little bit of energy there in the western parts of the Bay of Campeche. In fact, let's zoom in on that real quick, shall we? Just to kind of point that out. There it is. It shows up better there. And let's back this up just a little bit. 96, 72. It looks like the origins start at about 72 hours. I mean, look, 98L didn't look like it was going to do much early on, and it finally came together. We just have to watch this going forward. That's the bottom line. Out to 10 days, switch this back out to the broader shot. Now, it doesn't match up exactly what the GFS was showing. This is only 10 days out, but this configuration, the tropical waves getting stronger, the overall pressure pattern is such, it also lines up with everything else that I was showing you with this. Oh, let's get rid of the telestration, sorry. And this, I mean, between the GFS and the Euro, I think with climatology and everything else I showed you, I believe things are going to start to get busier. I know I've said it several times now. I'm convinced, and we'll just have to wait and see from here. All right, let's move on to something else. 30 years ago, this tweet here from Fox Weather, yeah, it was starting. The beginnings of Hurricane Andrew. Brian Norcross is sort of tweeting about it over at Fox Weather. If you're not following them, they started back in October. I will be working with Fox Weather once the hurricane season kicks into high gear, by the way. So yes, this is the evolution of Hurricane Andrew. And look, you can even see here, what is that? Some dry air to the north. Yes, even way back then, we could see the dry air. This innocuous little feature here would go on to become quite the nightmare at the end of August there, August 24th, making landfall 30 years ago. So the Hurricane Center, Brian Norcross, who of course was pivotal in getting information out to people from down inside the TV station. I think he was at WFOR, if memory serves, in Miami. 30 years. Wow, hard to believe. Coming up on 30 years since Andrew. All right, going to end with some lower 48 weather for you real quick here. I'm telling you, this is great to see the active monsoon. I know there's been flooding, even a couple of deaths, unfortunately, in the Las Vegas area. You know, that's unfortunate. It really is. I wish we could have 0 deaths with impactful weather. But the bigger picture, this moisture is desperately needed out there. I am deeply fascinated with it. A lot of stories about this, the wildfire, how this could, the wildfire situation, how this could help to maybe suppress that a little bit. But you get a lot of rain, you get a lot of greenage, and that turns into fuel. Everybody that knows firefighting, remember that movie, Only the Brave? Josh Brolin's character looks out there, says, "What do you see?" to that kid, and he's like, "I see fuel." Well, the rain brings the fuel as everything greens up, and then it dries out later. It's a weird double-edged sword, I know. But for now, the monsoonal effect is still in full force. And, as I was saying, some of this energy here from 98L could eventually work its way over into that pattern and add to even more heavy rain, especially for New Mexico. So that's something we'll pay attention to over the next few days. At least these oranges, for the most part, the big heat problems, have been lowering and getting less and less in recent days as we're getting past the peak part of the hottest part of the summer. I mean, I like it. I like hot and humid. That's fine with me, but that's just my preference. All right, I think we're just about done, so we'll get over here to the part where I ask you, as you watch on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel. Share the video with your friends, your colleagues, whomever that you may choose. You can watch it pretty much anywhere off of YouTube, and CJ puts these on our Facebook page, and I do appreciate that. Share the wealth, share the love and the joy and the education that I try to provide for you. All right? All right, now let's get over to the title so I can get out of here and post this for you on the internet, on the YouTubes, as they say. It's almost time. We will see what we will see, right? It's going to be an interesting few weeks ahead for a lot of reasons. I'll be back on Wednesday with another full update, pretty much every other day now at the very least, because I want to stay on top of this. But don't forget, each morning, What's Up in the Tropics, a nice short version of what I'm doing with this lengthier, in-depth discussion. Every morning before noon, I try to have that on. So far, ever since June 1st, I haven't missed a morning. I'm proud of that streak, especially with my busy life. You guys have a great rest of your Monday. As always, thanks for tuning in and giving me a part of your day. I appreciate it more than you know. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow morning.